There are a few different ways to book an artist depending on who the artist is. The most simple way is with an artist who doesn't have a team. So they probably just have their own personal email or a booking email that they use. When you reach out to that email, it's the artist that you're talking to. In that case, I personally consider it to be good practice to ask the artist what a comfortable fee is for them, because oftentimes it may be a little more than you anticipate, and you don't want to lowball an artist who's coming to play your event because they're the whole reason that people are coming into the space to begin with. Once you've reached out to that artist, you can negotiate with them. You want to let them know the date, the venue, perhaps other artists who have already confirmed, and then you want to agree on a fee that's really comfortable for them and that they're going to feel good about moving forward. If the artist has a team around them, you're probably either going to be reaching out to a manager, or if that artist is a little more well-established, they'll have a booking agent. And in that case, you will have to send a formal offer in. And it's pretty easy to Google like music formal offer and find some templates on the internet. Basically, an outline of information about what the event is, how much the artist is going to be paid, whether or not they're allowed to play shows before and after the event up to a certain amount of time, which is called a radius clause. It's important to know that an offer is legally binding. So if you've sent an offer to an agent and then for whatever reason you change your mind about wanting that artist to play, but the agent comes back and says, my artist is ready to confirm, there's not really anything that you can do. The offer itself stands as a legal contract up until the expiration date. One way to have a sense of whether or not an artist fee is feasible when you're just starting out in booking and maybe this is a new venture for you, is to consider what kind of audience that artist has. So if an artist might bring about 50 people to the show, then their artist fee is going to be smaller than an artist who is probably going to bring 500 to 600 people to the show. So that's how you can start to get a sense of the range of the different fees that artists create for themselves and where those fees come from. But if you're negotiating, there are other ways to support a fee that aren't directly through cash. If you have established partnerships with hotels, or if you have a really nice hospitality situation, you can include that. You can also take out what's called a radius clause, which essentially asks an artist not to play other shows up to a certain amount of time before and after your event. The idea behind a radius clause is that it helps bring audience into the space. Someone is going to say, oh, I haven't seen this artist that I love play in a while. I'm definitely going to that. Whereas if that artist has 2 shows within the same week, you might be dividing your audience between this show and that one. So if you're trying to negotiate, but perhaps your budget is on the smaller end, you can leave out any kind of radius clause and the artist has the opportunity to book other shows within that time frame. If they're an artist that's coming in from out of town, it's also helpful to have existing relationships with promoters and events in other cities, because you can say, okay, well, my offer for this Toronto show might not be huge, but I'm friends with this organization in Montreal and maybe they can book you a show there, and this organization can book you a show in Ottawa. Now you have 3 shows in a very small space, and it might make the incentive a little more worth it for that artist to come out for your show. Once you've confirmed an offer with an artist, it's time to create a contract. And I think an important consideration with contracts is that they're mutually beneficial, both for the organizer as well as for the artist. So you'd want to include all of the basic information about what the event is, where it's happening, how much the tickets are, how much the artist is going to be paid, and then any additional things that you might have included in your deal, such as a radius clause. Maybe you've asked the artist to post on social media. If this artist works with an agency, they're likely going to have a pre-existing contract that they'll want to use, and those are just standard basic contracts. You have the opportunity to read through that, ask questions about anything that doesn't make sense, or point out anything that you don't feel comfortable with. Although I personally have never found an issue with the standard agency contracts, they're quite reasonable. And if this artist doesn't work with an agency, then you want to create your own contract. And again, just outlining the terms of the agreement. And you also want to account for any what-if scenarios for the event. So in my opinion, it's good practice to say that if the organizer or the festival is canceling the event for any reason, they are still responsible to pay the artist their agreed upon fee, because otherwise that artist is ready to go and ready to show up. However, if the artist has to cancel for some reason, then it's often not a situation where the organizer pays the artist, but there are all kinds of complicated things in contracts, such as force majeure and other what-if scenarios where, depending on the artist and depending on the agency, sometimes you are still responsible for that fee.
It's hard to choose sort of the one key aspect of a festival, the one thing that stands above everything else or that needs the most attention. But I would say that the artist makes the festival. So again, when an artist shows up, you want everything to be taken care of, because you've spent so much time thinking about the kinds of artists that you want on your stage, all of the time reaching out to management or the artist directly, all of the time negotiating. So you want everything to flow smoothly once they're actually there. And really think through what it means to be a touring artist. So an artist might show up after an overnight flight, having had very little sleep, and what they need is just a nice room to hang out in, and an understanding that they're going to get a lobby call exactly when they need it. The car is going to be waiting. They're going to show up where they're supposed to go, and everything's going to be thought through, and everything's going to be taken care of. So on the very purely logistical side of things, you want to make sure that all that stuff is taken care of. You want to make sure that the rider is clearly met. That means hospitality-wise, that means technically, when they show up on stage, it's set up the way they expect, with the gear that they expect, and the monitor mix that they expect, all that sort of stuff. There's also more the behind-the-scenes stuff when it comes to making sure an artist is having a good experience. So you've negotiated the fee and all that, but you want to make sure that the fee that you've negotiated is actually fair and respectful. Most times this isn't going to be an issue. And I know, for example, at the TD Toronto Jazz Festival, we always say that our fees are at least the fees set out by the Toronto Musicians Association. And that's true. And oftentimes it's far more than that. I mean, rarely do we actually pay the bare minimum. And the reason is that's not respectful. Even though that's what the TMA says is the bare minimum, we have to acknowledge that artists have worked hard all their lives to get to this point. They're taking time out of their day to come and perform. You know, they have to bring equipment, like all that stuff goes into it. And then when you add on travel and accommodations and everything like that, the fee really has to reflect the realities of being a traveling professional musician. Again, by this point you've already negotiated all that, but keep that in mind when you're doing the negotiation process. And I know I have to check myself sometimes when an artist comes back with a fee, which maybe is a little higher than I was expecting. I really have to sit there just for a second and say, hold on. Let's say there's 5 artists in this band, and they're traveling from someplace in the United States, which requires 5 plane tickets. That in itself is expensive. You know, they've got money out the door before they even stepped on the stage. So I want to make sure that when they leave, they're feeling respected in terms of the time and the energy and the money that they have put into getting there. Once they get off the stage, you want to make sure that they have an opportunity to interact with their fans, for example, an opportunity to sell some merchandise, and maybe even an invitation to some other shows that are happening at the festival or the official festival jam session or something like that. You want the experience to be more than just their time on stage. You want them to feel like they've had a real chance to have a festival experience beyond just their performance. So you want to build trust and loyalty in the audience, certainly, because you need that audience to come back every year. But building trust in the musician community goes a huge, long way in developing the reputation of the festival. And then when you have an opportunity for a bit more of a special project or a special performance, it becomes easy to reach out to that local community and say, there's this opportunity, and you've performed at the festival, we've got this great relationship, would you like to come in and be a part of this? Or maybe there's a musician coming in from out of town who needs to pick up a couple of local musicians. If you've got that strong relationship with that local artist community, all of those things become so easy and fun, and again, contribute to the positive experience of the overall festival. So don't slough off the locals. Don't slough off that local community. I mean, they are one of your most important assets.